The shooting range. In this episode, pages of history, the Soviet tank transmissions, and their unique construction. The challenge. How many enemies can you destroy with a single shot? And metal beasts, a light tank with a very heavy gun. The guest of today's episode is a Soviet light tank called the BT-7, but not the original version. This one's got the F-32 gun. It came to War Thunder with the beginning of the Operation Heat event, and it quickly became one of the most desired rewards for a lot of our players. While retaining the extreme agility of a light tank, it can penetrate even the top MBT's hull sides, thanks to its new weapon. Let's take a closer look. The first thing that meets the eye is, of course, a huge 76mm gun. The elevation angles are the same, from -6 to +25 degrees, but the reload is significantly slower, up to 6.3 seconds. This latest weapon required a new, more spaced turret, which in its turn also got additional DT machine guns. Despite the heavy caliber, this light tank managed to retain its original weight of about 14 tons. In ideal circumstances, the engine of 400 horsepower can speed this machine up to 54 kph. The three-man crew also hasn't changed. There's the driver, the gunner, and the loader. The armor here is as thick as in the original BT-7, 20mm in the front of the hull, and just 15 in the front of the turret and in the sides. But you have to remember that the new turret has a constructional armor slope angle of 0 degrees. So overall, the protection of this tank is even a bit lower than that of the original. On the other hand, a light tank doesn't really need to have a lot of armor, does it? It survives not because it can take a punch, but because it's agile. And when it comes to that, the BT-7 shows great results both on and off the road. The second ace up its sleeve is firepower. If you've got some decent aiming skills, your new weapon will give you the opportunity to destroy most of your targets with one, maybe two shots. Especially so because this machine is placed at BR 3.0, where you don't get a lot of armored enemies. Frankly, the ones from higher battle ratings need to beware of this beast as well. The most useful rounds here are the APH-BCs, preferably the ones that are called the BR-350B. The A version of the same round has more explosive, sure, but the B one pierces 86mm of armor, which is more than enough to compensate for the lack of boom. It also has a fuse delay of almost 1 meter, so the explosion happens right in the enemy tank's battle compartment. The optimal strategy for the BT-7 is flanking the enemy and striking them in the side, out of the blue. Also, don't forget to capture points and earn additional spawn points. Since this tank is a light one, it gets rewarded not only for its own successes, but also for the frags that your allies get using your recon intel. The Operation Heat will last until 26th of August. If you still haven't got this amazing light tank with a heavy gun in your hangar, it's about time for you to remedy this situation. Why do the Soviet MBTs, like the T-64 and the T-72, look a lot less agile than the Western ones? When they drive forward, they don't really see the difference, but the moment you try to go backwards or turn on the spot, all the speed suddenly disappears somewhere. Where is the difference coming from? Let's figure it out. During the early 50s, the military was seriously thinking about replacing T-54 since it was becoming more and more outdated. The new tank should have been better armed and protected, but it wasn't allowed to gain any weight. The goal was to keep the mass of the tank inside 36 tons. Designer Alexander Morozov made a logical assumption that armored air is quite wasteful to drive around. So he proposed to significantly decrease the under-armor hull volume and make the engine compartment as narrow as possible. Trying to make the machine as compact as it can get without getting too expensive, the designer found a simple, cheap, and quite original solution. Install 2 epicyclic gearboxes, one for each side of the hull. At first glance, it would seem that 2 mechanisms would spend even more energy. So what would be cheap and compact about that? But firstly, they weren't really that big, and secondly, they had multiple things possible at the same time. Let's see. If we go forward, we use the same gears in both gearboxes. Need to turn? One of them gets to rotate slower than the other, and the relative caterpillar also starts going slower, making the tank gradually go sideways. Hence the economy on additional technologies, because we don't need any separate turning mechanisms anymore. Moreover, since you basically use brakes to change gears in an epicyclic gearbox, you don't need separate brakes as well. The construction turned out to be surprisingly simple and lightweight. All there was a flat transversal engine connected to 2 gearboxes that sped the machine up, turned it and slowed it down if needed. The T-64 was only 2 tons heavier than the T-54, while being a lot more powerful, agile, and better armored. But the decision also had its cost, and it was quite high. First of all, they had to cut away all reverse gears except one, and it was very slow. On the other hand, the military didn't require good backward speeds from the new tanks. They didn't plan for any tactical maneuvers that included going backwards, neither for changing positions, nor for escaping enemy fire. Secondly, they didn't make it possible to turn on the spot, at least not in a traditional way, when one caterpillar goes forward and the other goes backwards. In this case, one was going forward and the other one was being blocked. Thirdly, a tank of this construction is overall harder to control. For example, with the T-64 and the T-72, it's extremely easy to make a little mistake and send the tank skidding or even capsizing it. The Western tanks were being developed in a completely different way. No one even thought about sparing some money on transmissions. In fact, they were becoming more and more superior. They had at least 2 gears for going backwards and some a lot more. They also had a torque converter that gave engineers the opportunity of realizing an automatic transmission technology on a tank chassis. As for the turning mechanism, they'd started using hydrostatic transmissions, basically a combination of a hydraulic pump and an engine. They made it possible to control the tank with great precision at any speed. The driver only needed to touch the controls a little, and the heavyweight machine simply turned where it needed to go. Of course, these decisions also had a price. Everything does, you know. In this case, the comfort and maneuverability had a drawback in the form of a very complex construction, higher fuel consumption rates, and, most crucially, huge weight. For example, the power plant of the Leopard 2, including the engine, the transmission, and the cooling system, weighed about 8 tons on its own. On the other hand, these transmissions had a lot of development prospects, whereas the simplicity and the small size of the Soviet transmission didn't leave engineers the amount of room required for experiment. There was nowhere to improve them. The only option would be to change them completely. Recently, we received a question from Star Wars Expert. How many kills can you make with one shot in a tank against other tanks? We thought it was a great thing to test in our challenge section. So let's conduct this glorious experiment and find out how many frags we can get. We've two obvious choices here. First, line up some tanks and pierce them with a round that has a great penetration rate. Second option is to form a very dense group of tanks, hoping that the detonation of one ammo rack would cause a chain reaction, making the nearest machines blow up as well. If we succeeded at that, then the answers to Star Wars expert question would be infinite number. Or in other words, until you run out of tanks. Naturally, we should start with the second one. For this exercise, we'll pick a group of M55-1 Sheridan tanks. Full ammo loads of 152mm rounds should be enough to cause a huge explosion. Get them together as close as possible, detonate the first one, and nothing. The nearest machines do have some damaged modules. The crews are injured as well, but the ammo racks didn't detonate. We try a couple more times just in case, but the chain reaction still doesn't happen. Okay, now we know that you can't destroy an infinite number of tanks with one shot. Well, we had to try. Now, let's go to the first option, which is piercing multiple tanks one by one. We'll take the APFSDS with the highest penetration rate in the game, and the targets will be, say, the BT-5 light tanks. By the way, this is an experiment that has been recently conducted by content creator Alan Lucker, but in his video, he didn't have enough tanks to get the final number. Let's finish his experiment then. Taking a shot. The round hits the ammo rack of the first target and detonates it. Several other machines are also destroyed. Okay, we got 6 tanks. Not bad. But we expected a lot more, to be honest. Let's make another attempt, but this time we'll try avoiding hitting any modules able to slow the projectile down. Now that's more like it. 19 BT-5 tanks with a single shot. It appears that Lucker only needed 3 more machines to finish the experiment. In his video, he had 16 of them. But we'll go further than that. Let's pick the least protected tech there is. For example, the Italian AB-41 that only has 8mm of armor in the sides. Line them up once again and boom! 25 targets with the first shot. A couple of other attempts and we make a record of 32 destroyed machines. Okay, but what if we take something that has no armor at all? Let's say the Soviet Gaz AAA DShK. This isn't exactly a tank, sure. This is absolutely not a tank if we're being correct, but the result should be worth it. This is gonna be magnificent. Place your bets. How many will it be, do you think? 40? 50? 100? Rien ne va plus? No more bets, please? The final shot. And 166 targets go right back to their hangars. So here's your answer, 166. This is exactly the number of machines you can destroy with a single shot. At least, this is the highest number that we've managed to achieve while conducting our experiment for this challenge. And while hangar workers shout all kinds of foul language trying to fix the resounding destruction that we've just perpetrated, we're moving on to Hotmail. The first message was sent by a player called NoobGamer69. Does the artillery also getting better if you get to higher tiers? And if yes, does the low-rank tank have the low-tier artillery in battle if he's taken to a higher-tier battle? The in-game artillery fires 152mm HE rounds. Naturally, projectiles of this caliber would be more dangerous to the tanks on lower ranks. Though, If you're unlucky enough to get a direct hit, and not just a shockwave blast, you'll probably suffer even if you drive something really heavy and well protected. A user called Maddie Maggie asks, why are there slats in airplanes and what's the oldest plane that has them? Slats were invented and patented by the British aviation company called Handley Page. It happened at the time when aircraft designers all over the world were trying to invent some effective anti-spin systems. A slat itself is a deflectable surface on the frontal edge of the wing. Basically, it's like a flap, but located in the front of the wing and not in the back. As far as our data goes, the first aircraft to receive them was the Handley Page Gunung, a wooden biplane created in 1929. Then there is a question sent by Player Unknown 107. What does matter? The angle of the armor or the materials used in it. The materials determine how hard it will be for the round to pierce every centimeter of the armor, and the angle determines the so-called effective thickness of the armor, or, in other words, how many centimeters the round will have to go to penetrate the whole of it. So the answer to your question is undoubtedly both matter a lot. There's actually another big thing to consider: the construction of the armor itself, as it doesn't always look similar on the inside even when the materials are the same. Gaming Kingdom writes, will Israel join the game somewhen? Some of the Israeli tanks are already in the game. For example, the modified British Centurion called Shotkal. Also, there's of course the famous Merkava. As for introducing Israel as a separate nation with its own tech tree, we can't promise anything yet. And the last message for today was written by Ahmed Hassan. Why do the French tanks have rear-view mirrors? Well, the most accurate answer to that question is to look behind the tank. By the way, not only the French tanks have them. For example, the German Leopards have foldable mirrors. Moreover, they even have turning lights, like on real cars. They aren't very useful in a battle, but sometimes tanks do have to use public roads and highways. So these features can be considered as, well, a tank to civilians communications interface. That's it for today. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment. So, come on people, be courageous, subscribe to the channel, because I want you to, and press that bell button. Now you gotta leave a like, and tell us what you think in the comments below. See you in a week.